Forget CGI and green screens. When Hollywood's golden legends put their lives on the line, the danger was real and the stakes were deadly. Ever wonder what separates a screen icon from an ordinary star? Try cheating death, then dusting yourself off to finish the scene. Tonight, we're diving into the stories the studios tried to downplay. 10 classic movie titans who stared disaster in the face and refused to yell, "Cut." Ready to meet the daredevils who defined an era? Let's roll. Number 10. John Wayne, Stagecoach. The Duke himself almost became a casualty of his own legendary toughness during the filming of Stagecoach, the 1939 Western that launched him to superstardom. Wayne was performing a horse stunt when his mount spooked and threw him violently to the ground, landing on his chest and nearly crushing his ribcage. The impact was so severe that Wayne couldn't breathe for several terrifying moments, and the crew feared they had witnessed the end of what would become one of Hollywood's most iconic careers. What made this incident particularly dangerous was that Wayne had insisted on performing the stunt himself. Despite director John Ford's concerns about the challenging terrain, the horse had been startled by a piece of filming equipment, rearing up suddenly and throwing Wayne with tremendous force. When he hit the ground, the horse's hooves came dangerously close to his head, missing him by mere inches. The fall knocked the wind out of him so completely that he remained motionless for nearly a minute, causing panic among the cast and crew who thought he might be seriously injured or worse. Despite the pain shooting through his chest and the very real possibility that he had suffered internal injuries, Wayne refused to be taken to a hospital. Instead, he insisted on getting back on another horse and completing the scene. His determination to finish the stunt, despite nearly being trampled to death, became legendary on the set. The near-death experience didn't shake his confidence in the slightest. If anything, it seemed to fuel his determination to prove himself as a leading man. Wayne's willingness to continue filming after such a close call with death demonstrated the kind of old-school Hollywood professionalism that would define his entire career. He went on to complete Stagecoach, delivering the performance that would make him one of the biggest stars in movie history. The fact that he refused medical attention and insisted on retaking the dangerous stunt showed the incredible dedication to his craft that would become his trademark. Number 9. Harold Lloyd, Safety Last. Harold Lloyd's near-death experience during the filming of Safety Last is made even more remarkable by the fact that he performed one of cinema's most dangerous stunts with only one complete hand. Lloyd had lost his thumb and forefinger in a publicity stunt explosion years earlier, yet he still chose to perform the death-defying clock tower sequence that would become one of the most iconic images in film history. The stunt required him to hang from the hands of a massive clock, face 12 stories above the busy streets of Los Angeles, with nothing but a few mattresses on a platform below to break his fall. What made this stunt particularly terrifying was that Lloyd had tested the safety precautions beforehand by dropping a dummy onto the mattresses below. The dummy bounced off the safety net and plummeted to the street, proving just how dangerous the stunt really was. Despite this clear evidence of the mortal danger involved, Lloyd decided to proceed with the stunt anyway, trusting his life to the same inadequate safety measures that had failed the test dummy. During the filming, Lloyd's grip began to slip multiple times, and there were several moments where he genuinely feared he would fall to his death. The physical strain of hanging from the clock face with only one complete hand was enormous, and his injured hand made it even more difficult to maintain his grip. The wind at that height was also much stronger than anticipated, causing the clock hands to sway dangerously and making it nearly impossible to maintain his balance. Despite the obvious danger and several near falls during filming, Lloyd insisted on completing multiple takes of the sequence to ensure they captured the perfect shot. His determination to create the most spectacular stunt possible, even at the risk of his own life, exemplified the fearless spirit of silent film comedy. The resulting sequence not only became one of the most famous scenes in cinema history, but also proved that Lloyd's dedication to his craft was literally death-defying. Number 8. Buster Keaton, the General. Buster Keaton's philosophy of never breaking character, no matter what happened during filming, nearly cost him his life during the production of The General. While performing a sequence involving a massive railroad water tower, Keaton was supposed to pull a chain that would release a torrent of water. However, the mechanism malfunctioned, and instead of the controlled release that had been planned, the entire structure collapsed, sending thousands of gallons of water and heavy wooden beams crashing down on top of him. The impact was so severe that it broke his neck, though this injury wouldn't be diagnosed until years later. What makes Keaton's response to this near-death experience truly remarkable is that he didn't break character or stop the scene. Despite being knocked unconscious by the falling debris and suffering what would later be revealed as a broken neck, Keaton got back up and continued performing once he regained consciousness. His famous stone-face expression masked the excruciating pain he was experiencing, and he completed the entire sequence without letting on that he had been seriously injured. The broken neck went undiagnosed for years because Keaton never sought medical attention for the injury. He simply assumed that the persistent pain and stiffness he experienced were normal consequences of his physically demanding career. It wasn't until much later that doctors discovered the fracture, by which time it had healed improperly, leaving him with chronic pain that would plague him for the rest of his life. Keaton's decision to continue filming the general despite his life-threatening injury exemplified his legendary commitment to his craft. He believed that the show must go on, regardless of personal cost, and this incident became one of many examples of his willingness to sacrifice his body for the sake of his art. His refusal to let a broken neck stop him from completing one of his greatest films demonstrated the kind of dedication that made him one of cinema's most respected performers. Number 7. Clark Gable, San Francisco. Clark Gable's brush with death during the filming of San Francisco came during one of the most technically ambitious sequences ever attempted in 1930s Hollywood. The film's earthquake scene required massive sets to collapse in a controlled manner, but when one of the building facades malfunctioned, Gable found himself trapped under tons of falling debris. The incident occurred during a scene where Gable's character was supposed to rescue victims from a collapsing building, but the special effects went horribly wrong, nearly making him a victim himself. The massive set piece, designed to simulate the devastating 1906 San Francisco earthquake, involved elaborate mechanical systems to control the collapse of multiple building facades. When one of these systems failed, a wall that was supposed to fall away from the actors instead toppled directly toward Gable. He had only seconds to react before several tons of wood, plaster, and metal came crashing down on the exact spot where he had been standing moments before. The impact was so tremendous that it sent dust and debris flying throughout the entire soundstage. What made the situation even more dangerous was that Gable was wearing period costume that restricted his movement, making it difficult for him to escape the falling debris. He managed to dive out of the way at the last possible second, but several pieces of the set struck him as he fell, leaving him bruised and shaken. The near miss was so close that some of the falling debris actually tore his costume, and he emerged from the wreckage covered in dust and minor cuts. Despite the traumatic experience and the very real possibility that he could have been crushed to death, Gable insisted on continuing with the scene once the set was made safe. His determination to complete the earthquake sequence, despite nearly being killed by the very disaster he was supposed to be surviving on screen, demonstrated the kind of professional dedication that made him the king of Hollywood. The incident became legendary on the MGM lot, cementing his reputation as an actor who would never let danger interfere with his commitment to a role. Number 6. Errol Flynn, The Adventures of Robin Hood. Errol Flynn's swashbuckling style made him perfect for adventure films, but it also put him in constant danger during the filming of The Adventures of Robin Hood. During one of the most elaborate sword-fighting sequences ever filmed, Flynn was engaged in a duel with Basil Rathbone when a sword broke, sending a jagged metal fragment flying directly toward his face. The sharp piece of steel missed his eye by mere millimeters, instead slicing across his cheek and leaving a gash that required immediate medical attention. The sword-fighting scenes in Robin Hood were notoriously dangerous because Flynn insisted on using real steel blades rather than the safer prop weapons that most actors preferred. He believed that authentic weapons would make the fight scenes more realistic and exciting, but this decision nearly cost him his sight when Rathbone's blades snapped under the pressure of their vigorous choreography. The broken sword created a razor-sharp edge that could have easily blinded Flynn or severed an artery if it had struck him just inches higher or lower. What made Flynn's reaction to this near disaster even more impressive was his immediate response. Despite blood streaming down his face and the very real possibility that he had suffered a serious injury, Flynn's first concern was whether the cameras had captured the moment. He was more worried about whether they would need to reshoot the sequence than about his own well-being. The medics who rushed to treat his wound were amazed by his calm demeanor and his insistence that the show must go on. After receiving stitches for the facial wound, Flynn returned to complete the sword-fighting sequence the same day. His refusal to let a potentially disfiguring injury stop him from finishing one of cinema's greatest adventure films demonstrated the kind of fearless commitment that made him Hollywood's greatest swashbuckler. The scar from the incident remained visible for the rest of his career, serving as a permanent reminder of his dedication to authentic action sequences. Number 5. Jimmy Stewart, the man who shot Liberty Valance. Jimmy Stewart's near-death experience during The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance occurred during what should have been a routine horseback riding scene. Stewart, who had limited experience with horses, was performing a sequence where his character was supposed to be thrown from his mount. However, the horse became spooked by the film equipment and began bucking violently, throwing Stewart much harder than planned. He landed awkwardly, striking his head on a rock and losing consciousness for several minutes, while the panicked horse continued to thrash nearby. The incident was particularly dangerous because Stewart had been thrown into a rocky area that hadn't been properly cleared for the stunt. The production had focused on preparing the main area where the horse was supposed to buck, but they hadn't anticipated that the animal would carry Stewart so far from the intended landing zone. When he hit the ground, his head struck a jagged piece of limestone that could have easily caused a fatal skull fracture if he had landed just slightly differently. What made Stewart's situation even more perilous was that the horse, still in a state of panic, continued to rear and kick near his unconscious body. The crew had to work quickly to drive the animal away before its hooves could strike Stewart's motionless form. When he finally regained consciousness, he was disoriented and bleeding from a scalp wound, but he refused to be taken to a hospital until the day's filming was complete. Despite suffering a concussion and requiring stitches for his head wound, Stewart insisted on completing the scene. His determination to finish the Western, despite nearly being killed by the very horse that was supposed to be his character's trusted companion, demonstrated the kind of professional dedication that had made him one of Hollywood's most respected actors. The incident became part of the film's legend, with Stewart later joking that it was the most dangerous role he ever played, even counting his combat missions as a bomber pilot during World War II. Number 4. Cary Grant, North by Northwest. Cary Grant's brush with death during the filming of North by Northwest occurred during the famous crop duster sequence, one of the most suspenseful scenes in cinema history. While the sequence appears to show Grant being chased by a low-flying plane across an open field, the reality of filming it was far more dangerous than audiences could imagine. During one take, the pilot of the crop duster misjudged his altitude and came within inches of decapitating Grant with the aircraft's propeller, an error that could have instantly ended the life of one of Hollywood's biggest stars. The crop duster scene required precise choreography between Grant and the pilot, with the plane supposed to dive toward the actor and pull up at the last possible second to create the illusion of imminent danger. However, during one particular take, the pilot became disoriented and failed to pull up in time. The plane's propeller passed so close to Grant's head that the wind from the blades knocked off his hat and sent him tumbling to the ground. The entire crew watched in horror as what appeared to be a fatal accident unfolded before their eyes. Grant later described the experience as the most terrifying moment of his career, saying that he could feel the rush of air from the propeller and actually see the spinning blades as they passed over his head. The near miss was so close that the propeller's wake knocked him flat on his face, and he remained prone on the ground for several seconds, uncertain whether he had been struck by the aircraft. The pilot, equally shaken by the near disaster, had to make an emergency landing to recover from the shock. Despite this brush with death and the very real possibility that the next take could be his last, Grant insisted on completing the sequence. His determination to finish one of Hitchcock's most iconic scenes, despite nearly being killed by an out-of-control aircraft, demonstrated the kind of professional courage that made him one of cinema's greatest leading men. The completed sequence became one of the most famous chase scenes in film history, with audiences never knowing how close they came to witnessing an actual death. Number 3. Humphrey Bogart, the treasure of the Sierra Madre. Humphrey Bogart's near-death experience during The Treasure of the Sierra Madre occurred during the filming of the climactic confrontation scene in the Mexican wilderness. The production had taken the cast and crew to remote locations in Mexico, where medical facilities were scarce and dangerous animals were a constant threat. During one night shoot, Bogart was bitten by a venomous snake that had been attracted to the film equipment, and the bite occurred on his ankle, causing immediate swelling and intense pain that could have been fatal without proper treatment. The snake bite happened during a scene where Bogart's character was supposed to be searching for gold in rocky terrain. The area was known to be inhabited by several species of venomous snakes, but the production had taken what they believed were adequate precautions to keep the filming area safe. However, the bright lights used for the night shoot attracted insects, which in turn attracted the snake that would nearly kill one of Hollywood's biggest stars. When the snake struck, Bogart initially thought he had been cut by a sharp rock, but the rapid swelling and burning sensation quickly made it clear that he had been bitten by something venomous. The nearest hospital was hours away by rough mountain roads, and there was genuine concern that Bogart might not survive the journey. The crew worked frantically to slow the spread of the venom while improvising a stretcher to carry him to the nearest medical facility. Despite the life-threatening nature of the snake bite and the days of recovery required for the anti-venom treatment, Bogart insisted on returning to complete the film. His determination to finish The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, despite nearly dying from a venomous snake bite in the remote Mexican wilderness, demonstrated the kind of tough guy professionalism that made him one of Hollywood's most respected actors. The incident became part of the film's legend, with Bogart later joking that the snake was probably just a fan trying to get his autograph. Number 2. Gary Cooper, The Lives of a Bengal Lancer. Gary Cooper's near-death experience during The Lives of a Bengal Lancer occurred during one of the most spectacular action sequences ever filmed in 1930s Hollywood. The scene required Cooper to perform a dangerous horse stunt where he was supposed to leap from his mount onto a moving train, but the timing went catastrophically wrong. Instead of landing safely on the train car, Cooper missed his mark and fell between the moving cars, nearly being crushed by the massive wheels of the locomotive as it continued down the track. The stunt was particularly dangerous because it required split-second timing between Cooper, his horse, and the moving train. The sequence had been rehearsed multiple times, but during the actual filming, Cooper's horse stumbled slightly as it approached the train, throwing off the carefully planned choreography. This small error had potentially fatal consequences, as Cooper found himself falling directly into the path of the train's wheels, instead of landing safely on the designated car. What made the situation even more terrifying was that Cooper became trapped between two cars, with his leg caught in the coupling mechanism as the train continued to move. The crew worked frantically to signal the engineer to stop the locomotive, but the massive train required a significant distance to come to a complete halt. For several agonizing moments, Cooper was dragged along the tracks, his body bouncing against the railroad ties as he struggled to free himself from the deadly machinery. By the time the train finally stopped, Cooper was unconscious and bleeding from multiple wounds. The crew feared that he had been killed or permanently disabled by the accident, but miraculously, he had managed to avoid the train's wheels. Despite suffering severe bruises, cuts, and a possible concussion, Cooper insisted on completing the film once he recovered. His determination to finish The Lives of a Bengal Lancer, despite nearly being crushed to death by a moving train, demonstrated the kind of heroic dedication that made him one of Hollywood's most beloved leading men. Number 1. Douglas Fairbanks, The Thief of Baghdad. Douglas Fairbanks' near-death experience during The Thief of Baghdad represents perhaps the most death-defying stunt in silent film history. The swashbuckling star was performing a sequence where he had to slide down a massive sail using only a dagger to control his descent, but the fabric tore unexpectedly, sending him plummeting toward the deck of the ship set from a height of nearly 40 feet. The fall should have been fatal, but Fairbanks managed to grab onto a rope at the last possible second, saving his life by mere inches. The stunt was the culmination of Fairbanks' philosophy of performing increasingly dangerous feats to thrill audiences. The sail sequence required him to climb to the top of an enormous mast and then slide down the canvas, using a knife to slice through the material and control his speed. However, the sail had been weakened by previous takes, and when Fairbanks began his descent, the fabric suddenly gave way completely, leaving him in free fall with nothing to break his descent except the hard wooden deck below. What made Fairbanks' survival even more miraculous was his incredible athleticism and quick thinking. As he fell, he managed to grab a rigging rope that was hanging nearby, but the sudden jerk of his full body weight nearly dislocated his shoulder and left him swinging dangerously above the deck. The rope was only secured by a single pulley, and there was a very real possibility that it could give way at any moment, sending him crashing to the ground anyway. Despite the traumatic experience and the very real possibility that he could have been killed, Fairbanks insisted on completing the sequence the same day. His determination to finish The Thief of Baghdad, despite nearly falling to his death during one of cinema's most spectacular stunts, demonstrated the kind of fearless showmanship that made him the king of adventure films. The completed sequence became one of the most famous action scenes in silent cinema, with audiences never knowing how close they came to witnessing an actual death. His willingness to risk everything for the sake of entertainment exemplified the daredevil spirit that defined the golden age of Hollywood. So the next time you watch these silver screen legends leap from trains, dangle from clock towers, or outrun disaster, remember, the danger wasn't movie magic, it was deadly real. Which of these close calls shocked you most? Or did we leave out an old-school icon who deserves a spot? Drop your wildest Hollywood survival tales in the comments below. Hit like, subscribe for more untold Tinseltown drama, and remember, in classic Hollywood, the show never stopped, even when the risks were life and death.